Hello everybody and welcome back to another video on emotions and music. This week we'll tackle a highly requested topic, which is apocalyptic doom. This kind of music has a hefty, dramatic, epic sound that can be paired with monsters, deities, and really any other overwhelming kind of threat. Let's start out by listening to a short example of a theme that I've written, and then we can take a closer look at how I came up with it. Excellent. So, in essence, there are three fundamental strategies that you can use to create this kind of vibe for your music. The very first is to start with a simple, slow-moving, sad theme. This helps set the general mood for the kind of despair and danger that we want to capture in our sound. It also helps give the whole thing a more hymn-like quality that works really well for this type of music. To write a sad theme, focus on using lower energy strategies and darker harmonies. I started with a moderately slow tempo of 80 beats per minute and wrote a simple chord progression in the key of G minor. Then I composed a melody on top using mostly longer note values, like quarter notes and half notes. If you'd like to learn more about writing melodies, chord progressions, or even sad themes in particular, check out the links in the description of this video. Now, our sad theme will be at the core of the emotions for this kind of music. The trick here is to take our sketch and transform it into something much closer to despair, which is a closely related emotion, but with a much larger size and feel. For this, your strongest tools will be how you approach arranging and orchestrating this theme. First, we'll just start by copying and pasting this theme twice, so that it repeats 3 times. And right off the bat, in this very first section, we want to create a sense of overwhelming size in the music. And the best tools for the job here are something called linear textures. Now, in music, the word texture refers to the number and types of layers used in your composition. The linear textures are a series of strategies for arranging a single layer of music, typically a melody. And for this piece, I used a specific linear texture called the chordal texture. But if you'd like to learn more about the other types, there's a link in the description of this video that you may find helpful. Now, the chordal texture is quite simple. You just start with your melody, and then copy an identical rhythm below it. I can then use any of the notes from my underlying chord progression to help give this new line its own personality. But as long as the rhythm remains the same, and I don't deviate from the notes found in each chord, it will sound like a simple extension of my melody, instead of a separate layer in my texture. For this piece, I used this process twice to add even more size to my arrangement, by doubling the melody an octave lower, and then writing another chordal line underneath that. Now, normally a strict chordal texture would stop here, but I'm not really interested in being too strict at the moment. I just want to make sure this first section sounds massive. So I'll add a simple bass line underneath it all by filling out the root notes for each chord. This way, my music takes up another octave and will have an even heavier low end. And there we have it, a simple sketch for creating a massive sound that I can use later when I orchestrate the whole thing. So now that this section is good, let's move on to the next one. Now, when writing epic music, the temptation can be to just keep getting bigger and bigger with your sound. Unfortunately, this tends to get quite fatiguing to your audience, and each time you double down on the size of your arrangement, the effect will become less and less impactful. So, as you sketch out your music, you'll want to sprinkle in at least a few different sections where the size of your arrangement comes back down. The trick is to do this without losing any of your momentum or energy. You can compensate for the loss of size by adding more movement and layers to your music. And for this, our strongest tools will be something called the accompanimental textures. The accompanimental textures focus on presenting a single primary layer, usually melody, and then supporting it with a few secondary accompanimental layers. For this video, I'll use something called the polythematic texture, which is a primary melody supported by a counter melody. But if you're interested in learning more, I'll have another link in the description of this video. We'll start with our simple melody and then use the chords as an inspiration for adding a rhythmic counter melody and a more interesting bass line. Now, once again, I'm going to sound like a broken record here, but check the description if you want to learn more about this. I would love to go more in depth here, but if I were to dive into each topic, this video would easily stretch out to over an hour long. So for now, let's just move on. So while this texture has many more layers than the first section of the music, the lack of doubling helps set the stage for a much smaller sound, while the added intricacy and movement help keep the overall energy relatively high. When I do eventually orchestrate this section, my instrument choice will also help go a long way towards making sure this section feels comparably smaller than the first. In fact, to help emphasize this, I'll even drop the primary theme from this section so we only have the ostinato, counter melody, and bass line. This helps further reduce the size of this section, while also giving us a bit of a break from the primary melody, so it doesn't sound too repetitive. Now in section 3, I can combine the first two sections to create the largest and most climactic section of them all. I'll use my chordal arrangement of the melody, while adding my ostinato, counter melody, and new bass line to the mix. This can be a bit tricky to do since having too many layers can make my music sound cluttered and muddy, but we can get around this by making sure each layer has its own octave or register in the arrangement, so that none of them overlap too much. So once we've taken the time to carefully arrange our theme, using a combination of massive linear textures and smaller but equally high energy accompanimental textures, the last step is to orchestrate the whole thing. For this, you'll want to focus on using strings, choir, brass, and percussion, especially large metallic percussion like timpani and tubular bells. These instruments all help create a feeling of massive size and power in your music. The woodwinds aren't as common in this genre, since they tend to lack the kind of presence and power that's needed, but that doesn't mean you can't use them. However, they will usually be replaced with electronic sounds like synths, in order to create a more hybrid color. However, in this example, I stuck strictly to orchestral sounds. As we re-listen to the sample, I will include notes on the screen so you can follow along with the strategies I used to help orchestrate my sketch. So, to summarize everything we've learned, if you want to score an epic and overwhelming threat, first start with a simple, slow, and sad theme. Next, use a combination of linear textures for creating a massive size for your sound, and accompanimental textures in between to help give your audience a break while keeping things interesting with some added movement and nuance. Finally, when orchestrating, focus on strings, brass, choir, and percussion instruments. So with that, we have reached the end of another video. I hope you found it helpful. I want to take a quick moment to thank my wonderful patrons who make videos like this one possible. This week, a special shout out goes to my newest patron, Christian Packman. Thank you for your support, my friend. And another thank you goes out to all of you who show your support through the many kind comments, messages, and emails that I receive. They mean more to me than you know. So until next time, my friends, keep studying, keep working hard, and keep writing new music.